reacted sharply to a sudden spike in compressed natural gas prices, which surged from 230 naira to 380 naira per standard cubic meter at major outlets like NIPCO CNG and Mobil on Monday. However, the NNPCL station in Abuja's Central Business District reportedly maintained the lower rate, which is 230 naira. While drivers are concerned that the hike could erode CNG's cost advantage over petrol, stakeholders in Nigeria's compressed natural gas sector have warned that retail prices may need to rise to about 520 naira per standard cubic meter to attract substantial private investment. Although this has been described as a threat to the government's push for gas-powered mobility, questions remain about how to scale up CNG while balancing affordability for consumers with attractive returns for investors. Well, from Ibadan in Oyo State, I have joining me for more on this, Tunde Onakoya, the Managing Director, Autoclinicng Solution. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Onakoya.
Good morning to you, Petra, and thank you for having me once again.
All right, now the current increase in the retail price of CNG doesn't seem to be government-backed. I mean, for a lack of a better word, given that NNPC still sells at the approved rate of 230 naira. I mean, as at the time this report was put out, which was on Monday, could you provide more information around this?
So when you say approved rate, approved by whom? That's the first question. Who approved the rate of 230 naira in the first place? And you would recall that we've had a conversation about this before, wherein I mentioned that the biggest challenge we have right now has to do with pricing. And I mentioned that time that at the moment, vehicles are competing with industrial users of CNG. The agreement before now has been to provide CNG for industrial use, and that was at about 60 cents per SCM to industries. Now, the fact that most stations are selling, it has to be something in terms of arrangement from the government. And it has become very clear now that there was a subsidy regime around it, wherein the government decides on the price and then gets all these operators who have agreements to sell to industry to actually sell to cars. But if you look at the pricing, I don't know, you said Abuja, there's 230 naira per SCM in Abuja. I know there are 2 NNPC stations in Ibadan that sell CNG. And I've never seen them, since they opened, sell below 404 naira per SCM in Ibadan. I know that as of last week, NIPCO Bovers in Ibadan here have been selling, we're selling at about 280 naira per SCM, 380 naira per SCM. And as of this morning, I am aware that Bovers is already selling at about 405 naira or 450 naira per SCM within that range. And that NIPCO has also taken their price up to 380 naira per SCM. So yes, there's an increment in the price per SCM of CNG. However, also something I've mentioned on this platform with you before is that the communication around CNG in Nigeria is extremely poor. We are not getting enough professionals actually communicating about CNG usage, pricing, and the structure in Nigeria. And that is doing a lot of disservice to the CNG ecosystem in Nigeria. Now, people keep talking about, oh, CNG is now 380 naira. Let's bring it to perspective right now. And that's what we should be looking at. A 65-liter CNG tank is 14 SCM. Now, if a 65-liter CNG tank is 14 SCM, if I want to fill it up today, it will cost me about 6,000 naira to fill up 65 liters, 65-liter tank of CNG. If I break that down into naira and kobo per liter, CNG at the most expensive of 450 naira per SCM today is still selling at about 90 naira per liter. Petrol is selling between 900 and 1,000 naira per liter as we speak now. So if that is the case, is the gap really closing as we are saying? The gap is not closing at all. Because if today I still want to drive my car, for example, from Ibadan to Lagos and back, I will need between 20 and 25 liters of petrol, which will cost me about 24,000 25,000 naira. If I want to do the same on CNG, I'm still not going to be spending more than 6,000 naira. So the question is, even if CNG is selling at 450 naira per SCM, you are still going to have a minimum of 70% reduction in your operating cost of that vehicle. Of course, one of the things you then enjoy is cleaner running energy, you have better running vehicle, and you have a long-lasting engine. So you still get the benefit of CNG at about 25%, even when the price has gone up to 450 naira per SCM in the worst case scenario.
And I would expect that, would you not just make this more of a comparison between CNG and petrol? I'd like us to probably look at the workings around it and see what a fair price would be. What do you think would be a fair price when you look at the value chain and, all the things that are involved?
Okay, so over time, I also recall that we have talked about it here, that it cost about $500,000 to put up a CNG daughter station. That can rise rapidly towards about $1 million to put an infrastructure for a mother station on ground, or even more. So we're talking about investment requirement of billions, and it has to be a patient fund. Because if it is not patient fund, then investors cannot recoup their money within a short period of time. So the cost of setting up this CNG infrastructure itself is something that needs to be discussed, and the funding model for it also needs to be discussed on its own. However, if currently the price in Nigeria and the international market is about 60 cents per SCM, 60 cents is still almost 1,000 naira per SCM. If we look at it at industrial level, which is typically a higher pressure of 250 bars and above for industrial use. Now, for vehicle use, unless the new pricing structure is put in place and new operators are licensed to be able to run for automotive use, which is still barely 1% of our current consumption of CNG in Nigeria. The use in all the vehicles, even though we say there are queues, a lot of vehicles are now running on CNG, it is barely 1% of the production and available CNG capacity in Nigeria. So if we expect people to come into that ecosystem and invest, they need to be able to make their money. And if they are going to make their money, there must be fair pricing, there must be availability, there must be accessibility. All of these things are important for it to be able to happen.
And I was going to ask you what's responsible for the low adoption rate, and I think you've sort of answered some of them, talking about accessibility and what have you. What role does the PiCNG play in all of this? I mean, there were many promises. What's happening?
Okay, so we need to understand that the PiCNG is an initiative, and as an initiative, it is not a government agency that is going to put infrastructure in place. What PiCNG does, and I'm not an official spokesperson, what PiCNG does, based on what we are aware of their mandates, is to facilitate the adoption of CNG and alternative fuel source for vehicles in Nigeria. Now, to facilitate that, then they are going to have to woo investors, get them to come in. They also will provide them with an enabling environment by helping them so they become the liaison between various government agencies, would-be investors, infrastructure providers, and all of that. So PiCNG is going to just create an enabling environment, help to champion the cause of the adoption of CNG in Nigeria. That is about all PiCNG can do.
Well, are the investors coming in? You said that theirs is to facilitate investors and all of those. Are they coming in, and are they really investing in this sector?
Now, for investors to come in, the business has to be lucrative enough. It has to be worth their investment. And that is part of what we are seeing right now. This price adjustment or price modulation as it is now will boost investors' confidence in the fact that when I recall that there was a filling station in Abuja that opened and started selling CNG at about 400 and something naira per SCM, and it was closed down because that was not the government approved pricing for it. Now, if somebody else wanted to come into the country to invest as such, is he going to rely on what the government says the price should be? Or is this person going to be able to fix his price based on his own economic realities? Now, that is part of what is happening right now. And we know that PiCNG has work to do around that area. So are the investors coming in? Yes, investors are coming in. We have new mother stations that have shown up. We have new pipelines that are being laid. The AKK pipeline is there. It's something that has been on for a while and is nearing completion. We also have investors. There's a Shell or your state government pipeline that is moving from Lagos heading towards Ibadan. That one is also nearing completion as it is. So yes, we have more infrastructure coming in, not at the pace it should come in, because you have to boost investors' confidence to be able to achieve it.
But we know there are incentives that the government has provided. Isn't that enough to incentivize those people, to do what it is they need to do?
Perhaps it's not enough yet. I don't think the government has done enough yet. Yes, the incentives could be maybe tax break here or
waivers and all, yes.
This, that. But in the market, the waivers now, in the marketplace, the core becomes buying and selling. These people are here to sell. They want to buy, they want to sell. What is the sustainable pricing model that they can use to be able to achieve that? And if they are not getting the right pricing model, and the government is still going to interfere in their pricing, it's not going to be market-driven, it's not going to be supply-driven, it's not going to be demand-driven, then I will have very little confidence in being able to put my money there. Because government can decide tomorrow that I should sell at 100 naira, and I wouldn't have a choice, even though I have bank loans that are there piling up on my neck, and I cannot break even with that.
So what then? I mean, I'm taking you back to that question about what you think a fair price should be. Can we get a number? That's one. Okay, let me get you to answer that first. I mean, is there any number you can think of? Because you're within that value chain, I probably know, a thing or two. Can you give us a number of what a relatively, fair price should be?
Okay, so like I said, 60 cents per SCM is can be up to 700-800 naira. If we look at it at 60 cents per SCM. Of course, it can be lower than that. But I would say, if we want to talk about a fair price, we talk about between 450 naira and maybe about 600 naira with the current framework we have in place. It is very important that I say that it is based on the current framework we have in place. If we actually make provision as a policy from government, and based on agreements that we are signing with partners, joint ventures, operators, and the rest, we are actually focused on automotive use of CNG. Then definitely the framework will be different, and that framework will enable for lower pricing. Again, I will emphasize the current framework we have is CNG for export. We produce CNG, we export the CNG. So if we are going to sell it locally, we must be able to match possibly the export pricing for us to be able to get somebody to put their money in it. So don't forget, recently, even the federal government had recently said that, you know what, we would like a situation where no more export of share products from Nigeria for the next 6 months. Why? Because we want to stimulate the local production of it. Now, we know that share prices will definitely change based on that framework. Now, in the case of CNG, CNG at the moment in Nigeria is designed for export. We have been exporting over the years. And now we're telling the same operators that we have signed 25, 30 years agreements with to actually now sell CNG locally, even though their investment is based for exports, their projection is based on exports. We're just looking into the policy now and the agreements we have with these same people to bring them to actually then invest for local. Now, if they're going to invest for local use in automotive, is that sustainable? They must see the price that is flexible enough, must make sense to their books in terms of the finances.
All right, let me leave you with this particular question, looking at, consumer protection and, also curbing arbitrary pricing. How do we achieve that?
Okay, at the moment, except for people that use MRUs, which are mobile refilling units, they are the ones that are determining their price. I know that every other station that dispenses CNG at the moment are getting approval for their pricing, which is some sort of consumer protection. Nobody should be selling above certain prices without due approval from the NNPCL and other agencies of government, which is what we currently have. We haven't seen a private depot, and I have traversed a reasonable length and breadth of the CNG ecosystem in Nigeria. We haven't seen arbitrary pricing anywhere that has gone above the 60 cents that I mentioned as being the standard price in US dollars converted to Naira. So that's what we have seen. So for consumer protection, as long as we are getting uniformity in pricing, reasonably based on people's experiences, because don't forget, we have mother station in Ibadan, in Ogun State here. If that CNG is going to get to Ibadan, they will have to truck it to Ibadan. So there will be a trucking fee. We know the same thing applies to petrol. The pricing of petrol is varying over different distances based on trucking fee. The same thing would apply to CNG. If we say we want to get uniform pricing all through, it may not be realistic because we have to factor in other factors of production in terms of getting this thing to the consumers.
Well, from all you have said today, this looks like a growing sector or subsector that we need to pay attention to and even do more. We'll probably get to learn every day and then, improve our policies around making it work. Thank you so much, Tunde Onakoya, MD Autoclinicng Solution, for your time on the show today.